The growl started low, a vibration you felt in the concrete floor before you ever heard it. It was a sound that didn't just promise violence. It was the sound of a promise already broken, a soul shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. In the last kennel, at the very end of the K9 unit's immaculate row, was a storm contained in flesh and bone. His name was Chaos, and he was living up to it every second of every day. He was a magnificent German shepherd, a specimen of breeding so perfect he looked like he'd been carved from obsidian and lightning. But his eyes were where the perfection ended. They weren't the intelligent, loyal brown of a police dog. They were chips of amber, burning with a fire that seemed to consume everything. Trust, kindness, hope. No one could get near him. Not the most experienced handlers, not the K9 unit captain, not even the vet with a tranquilizer gun. He'd lunge at the bars, teeth snapping with the force of a bear trap, his barks echoing through the precinct like cannon fire. He was $1 million dog, trained for the most dangerous missions, and he was completely, terrifyingly broken. What had happened? That was the mystery that hung in the air, thick as smoke. He'd come back from his last deployment with his partner, Officer Richards. Different. Richards had been medically discharged, a leg injury the official report said, but the man's spirit was just as shattered as his dog's. He couldn't speak about what happened, and Chaos couldn't either. The dog was a living, breathing testament to some unspeakable trauma, a puzzle no one had the courage to solve. So, they labeled him aggressive, unstable, a failed asset. The whispers had already started, the grim, quiet talks about the inevitable. Euthanasia. It was a word no one wanted to say, but it was a shadow lengthening over Chaos's kennel. Stay till the end, because this incredible story will leave you speechless. It's a story about a connection so profound, it defies all logic, and a truth so dark, it could only be seen by the eyes of a broken hero. What was this dog trying to tell them? What secret was he guarding with such ferocious loyalty? Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now, let's get back to the storm in the kennel. The precinct was a hive of controlled energy, a place of order and procedure. But the K9 wing felt different. It was a place of palpable tension, and the epicenter was chaos. Officer Miller, a man with a face weathered by years of service and a heart heavy with failure, stood a safe 10 feet from the kennel. He'd been assigned Chaos after Richards left, tasked with the impossible job of rehabilitation. It had been 3 weeks of hell. "Easy, boy. Easy now," Miller would murmur, his voice a low, placating rumble. It was useless. Chaos would just pace, a relentless, caged predator, his muscles coiled tight, his head low. The only thing Miller had managed to do was slide a bowl of food and water under the kennel door with a long pole. Every attempt to get closer was met with a display of aggression so primal it made the hairs on Miller's arms stand up. He'd seen tough dogs, hardened street dogs, but this was something else. This wasn't just aggression. It felt like a desperate, frantic warning. But a warning about what? That's when Clara first saw him. She wasn't a cop. She was a civilian, a records clerk who'd been brought in to help digitize old files. She was 7 months pregnant, a gentle soul with a kindness that seemed to radiate from her, softening the harsh fluorescent lights of the station. Her husband, Mark, was a detective in the robbery division, and he worried about her constantly, about the stress of the environment. But Clara loved the sense of purpose, of being a small part of something that kept people safe. She had been heading to the break room when a particular sound, a guttural bark that was more of a roar, stopped her dead in her tracks. It was a sound of pure anguish. Curiosity, mixed with a strange, unexplainable empathy, pulled her down the hallway she wasn't supposed to be in. She followed the sound to the K9 wing. The other dogs in their kennels were whining, unsettled by the raw fury emanating from the end of the row. And there he was, Chaos. He was lunging at the bars, his eyes locked on Officer Miller, who was slowly backing away. Clara froze in the doorway, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly. She wasn't scared, not in the way she should have been. She felt a profound sadness. It was as if she could feel his pain, a crushing weight of despair that was fueling his rage. She saw past the bared teeth and the terrifying snarls. She saw a creature screaming for help in the only way he knew how. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be here," Miller said, his voice strained, never taking his eyes off the dog. "This area is restricted. And this dog, he's not safe." Clara didn't answer. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked with Chaos's. For a split second, in the midst of his frenzy, the dog's head whipped around, and his burning amber eyes met hers. The barking stopped. Instantly. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The air, which had been crackling with violence, suddenly went still. Chaos stood frozen, his powerful body rigid, his gaze fixed on her. He wasn't snarling anymore. He was just watching. His head was cocked slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. It wasn't kindness, not yet, but the inferno had banked, replaced by an intense, burning curiosity. Clara felt a pull, an invisible thread connecting her to this broken animal. She took a hesitant step forward. "Ma'am, no. Get back," Miller commanded, his voice sharp with alarm. But Clara didn't listen. She couldn't. It was like her feet were moving on their own. She took another step, her hand still resting on her baby. Chaos didn't move. He just watched her, his breathing heavy but the growl gone. She stopped just out of Miller's reach, about 15 feet from the kennel. She couldn't explain it. Not to Miller, not to her husband, not even to herself. But she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that this animal wasn't evil. He was hurting, and for some reason, her presence was a balm to his tormented spirit. "What's his name?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, soft and melodic in the tense silence. Miller stared at her, then at the dog, his expression a mixture of disbelief and awe. He'd never seen Chaos go quiet like this. Never. That's Chaos," he finally stammered. Clara smiled, a small, sad smile. "No," she said softly, her eyes still locked with the dog's. "That's not his name. That's just what he's feeling." And in that moment, a silent promise was made. A pregnant records clerk, with nothing but a compassionate heart, decided she would not let this beautiful, broken soul be extinguished. She didn't know how, but she was going to reach the dog trapped inside the storm. She was going to find out what he was so desperately trying to say. Everyone thought he was a monster. But Clara, and perhaps the tiny, unborn life she carried, saw the truth. They saw the hero buried underneath the rage. The next day, Clara returned. She brought a small, foldable chair and a thermos of chamomile tea. Mark had begged her not to. "Clara, please," he'd said, his face etched with worry. "It's a dangerous animal. The handlers can't even get near it. What do you think you can do?" She didn't have an answer for him, not a logical one anyway. It was a feeling, a deep, resonant hum in her soul that told her this was something she had to do. She set up her chair in the same spot as the day before, a safe 15 feet from the kennel. Officer Miller was there, observing from a distance, his arms crossed, a look of profound skepticism on his face. He'd gotten permission from the captain, who'd probably thought, "What's the harm? The dog's a lost cause anyway." When Clara arrived, Chaos was pacing, the low growl already rumbling in his chest. But the moment he saw her, the same strange stillness fell over him. He stopped his patrol, his body tensing as he watched her settle into the chair. He didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He just stood there, a powerful statue of conflicted emotions. Clara didn't try to get closer. She didn't speak to him, not with words. She simply sat, sipping her tea, and occasionally humming a soft lullaby, the same one she hummed to the baby in her womb. For an hour, she sat in the quiet company of the most feared dog in the precinct. The air was thick with unspoken things. She could feel his vigilance, the way his eyes tracked every single movement, not just hers, but everything happening in the hallway beyond the door. It wasn't the random scanning of a bored animal, it was professional. It was the calculated surveillance of a highly trained protector. She started to see the little things. The subtle twitch of his ear as a car backfired outside. The way his nostrils flared, tasting the air, when a new officer walked past the doorway. He was processing a world of information that she was completely blind to. His aggression, she realized, wasn't chaos at all. It was a hyper-focused, overactive defense mechanism. He was a soldier still at war, seeing threats in every shadow. Days turned into a week. Every day, during her lunch break, Clara would visit him. She would sit in her chair, sometimes reading a book aloud, her voice a soothing melody in the sterile environment. The other officers started to notice. They'd walk by, slow down, and stare in disbelief. The dog that had been a whirlwind of fury was now calm. At least, he was calm when she was there. The moment she packed up her chair to leave, a low whine would escape his throat, and the restless pacing would begin anew. Officer Miller watched it all, his skepticism slowly melting away, replaced by a cautious ember of hope. He started talking to Clara, telling her about Chaos, about his perfect record before the last mission, how he was the smartest dog in the academy, capable of detecting 14 different types of explosives and tracking a scent that was 3 days old. He'd been a legend in the making. He and Richards were inseparable, Miller said one afternoon, leaning against the wall opposite Clara. They say they were more like one being than a man and his K9. Whatever happened on that mission, it broke them both. Clara looked at Chaos, who was now lying down. This was a new development. He had never shown that level of relaxation before. He wasn't fully at ease, his head was still up, his ears alert, but he was lying down, his gaze fixed on her. It was a sign of trust, a tiny crack in the fortress he had built around himself. "Do you know what happened?" Clara asked softly. Miller shook his head. "Classified. All I know is it was a narcotics raid on a warehouse. It went bad. Richards got hit, and another officer didn't make it. They said Chaos was a hero, that he dragged Richards to safety. But when they got him back here, he was this," he gestured to the dog. "He wouldn't let anyone near Richards' empty locker. He just stood guard, snarling at anyone who tried to clear it out. They had to sedate him just to get him into this kennel." A wave of understanding washed over Clara. He wasn't just aggressive. He was grieving. He was a loyal partner who had lost his other half, a protector who perhaps felt he had failed. His anger wasn't aimed at the world. It was a shield for his broken heart. That day, she decided to take a risk. After finishing her chapter, she stood up and took one slow, deliberate step closer. Chaos immediately shot to his feet, a low growl starting in his chest. The calm spell was broken. "Easy now," Clara whispered, her voice full of an emotion he seemed to understand. "I'm not going to hurt you." She took another step. The growl got louder. His body was tense, ready to spring. Miller tensed up, ready to intervene. "Clara, maybe that's enough for today." But Clara saw something else in his eyes. Beyond the warning, she saw fear. He was afraid she would hurt him, or worse, that she would leave him like everyone else had. Her heart ached for him. She stopped, knelt down slowly, wincing a little with the effort of her pregnancy. She was now on his level. It was a gesture of submission, of trust. She didn't speak. She just stayed there, kneeling on the cold concrete floor, making herself vulnerable. She held out her hand, palm up, not reaching for the cage, but simply offering an invitation. Chaos stared at her hand, then back at her face. The growl subsided into a low, uncertain rumble. He took a hesitant step forward, his nose twitching. He could smell her, the scent of chamomile tea, of lavender soap, and something else, the unique, gentle scent of impending motherhood. He whined, a sound so full of conflict and confusion it was heartbreaking. He was a dog torn between his ingrained training to be suspicious of everyone and an instinct he couldn't explain that told him this person was safe. Slowly, tentatively, he crept forward until his wet nose was just an inch from the bars. He didn't touch her hand, but he didn't retreat. He just stood there, inhaling her scent, his amber eyes searching hers for a truth he desperately needed to find. For the first time in months, Chaos was not reacting with aggression. He was asking a question, and in her calm, steady gaze, Clara was giving him the answer. "You are not alone." The bond between Clara and Chaos deepened with each passing day. The 5 feet of concrete that separated her chair and his kennel became a sacred space, a bridge between two worlds. The officers in the precinct started calling her the dog whisperer, half in jest, half in genuine awe. They had never seen anything like it. One afternoon, Mark came to find her. He stood in the doorway of the K9 wing, his face a mask of concern and confusion. He saw his pregnant wife sitting calmly, reading a children's story aloud, and the precinct's most dangerous animal lying peacefully, his head resting on his paws, listening intently. "Clara," he said, his voice soft but firm. "We need to talk." She finished her sentence, closed the book, and looked up at him. "Hi, honey. Is everything okay?" "No, it's not okay," he said, walking over and helping her to her feet. He glanced nervously at Chaos, who had risen and was watching him with an unnerving intensity. There was no growl, but the message was clear: be careful with her. "The captain is putting in the final paperwork," Mark said in a low voice, leading her out into the main hallway. "They're scheduling it for the end of next week." The euthanasia. Clara's heart sank. She felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she whispered. "No, they can't. Look at him, Mark. He's getting better. He just needs more time. Honey, he lets you near him. That's it." He almost took Miller's hand off this morning when he tried to change his water bowl without the pole. To them, nothing has changed. He's a liability they can't afford to keep. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. She looked back through the door at Chaos, who was now standing at the front of his kennel, whining softly, as if he knew they were talking about him. It wasn't fair. He was a hero who had been traumatized, and instead of helping him, they were going to discard him like a broken weapon. "I won't let them," she said, a fierce determination hardening her voice. "There has to be something I can do." Her resolve solidified. She spent the next few days not just sitting with Chaos, but actively working with him. She started by tossing small, high-value treats into his kennel. At first, he ignored them, but she was patient. She would toss a piece of dried liver, and he would watch it land, then look back at her. After a few days, he began to eat them, but only after she had moved back to her chair. It was progress. The biggest breakthrough came a week before he was scheduled to be put down. Clara was sitting in her usual spot, feeling the baby kick inside her. She smiled and placed her hand on her belly. Chaos, who was watching her intently, let out a soft whine. On pure instinct, Clara moved her chair closer, inch by inch, until her knees were almost touching the kennel bars. Chaos stood up, but didn't growl. He watched her, his body language a mix of anxiety and intense curiosity. "It's okay," she whispered. "This is just my little one saying hello." She slowly extended her hand, not towards his face, but lower down, near the bottom of the bars. She held it there, perfectly still. Her heart was pounding. This was the moment of truth. Either he would accept her, or he would confirm everyone's worst fears. Chaos trembled. A low whimper escaped his throat. He took a step back, then another forward. He was at war with himself. His training, his trauma, everything screamed at him to see the outstretched hand as a threat. But his heart, an instinct far older and deeper, was telling him something else. It was telling him this was safety. This was kindness. This was family. With a final, shuddering breath, he leaned forward. He didn't lick her hand. He didn't nudge it. He simply pressed the side of his face, his cheek, gently against the cold steel bars, as close to her hand as he could possibly get without touching it. He closed his eyes. It was a gesture of such profound trust, of such complete surrender, that it brought tears to Clara's eyes. She gently laid her fingers on the bars next to his face, and for a long moment, they stayed like that, a pregnant woman and a condemned dog, sharing a silent moment of connection that transcended fear and pain. Officer Miller, who had been watching from the doorway, felt a lump form in his throat. He quietly backed away, went straight to the captain's office, and said, "Sir, I think you need to see something. And we need to postpone that order. Just give her a little more time." The captain reluctantly agreed to a 1-week extension. It wasn't a pardon, but it was a sliver of hope. During that week, Clara noticed something new in Chaos's behavior. His hypervigilance started to seem less random and more specific. He was always calm with her, Miller, and a few of the other officers he saw regularly. But certain people would set him off. One of them was a janitor who Chaos would bark at relentlessly whenever he came to clean the floors. Another was a young, seemingly friendly officer from the traffic division named Davies. Davies was a popular guy, always smiling, always ready with a joke. But whenever he walked past the K9 wing, Chaos would go ballistic. It was different from his previous rage. It was targeted. He would press his body against the bars, his eyes locked on Davies, a deep, menacing growl rumbling in his chest. "Man, that dog really hates me." Davies would laugh it off, shaking his head. "Guess I'm just not a dog person." Clara didn't think it was funny. She watched these interactions closely. There was nothing overtly threatening about Davies. He never even looked at the dog. But Chaos saw something. He sensed something. It was the same protective, warning behavior he'd displayed before, but now it had a clear target. He does that every time Davies walks by, Miller confirmed, his brow furrowed in thought. Weird, isn't it? Davies is one of the nicest guys on the force. Clara wasn't so sure. She trusted Chaos's instincts more than she trusted a friendly smile. An animal's intuition cuts through deception. They don't see the uniform or the charming personality. They see the soul. And Chaos was telling her, in the clearest way he could, that Officer Davies's soul was dark. She tried to voice her concerns to Mark, but he dismissed them. Honey, you're getting attached. Chaos is a traumatized dog. He's probably just reacting to a smell, a sound, anything. Davies is a good cop. He's been on the force for 5 years, clean record. Clara let it go, but she couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The dog knew something. The final day of the extension was approaching, and she was running out of time to prove that Chaos wasn't a monster, but a guardian. A guardian who was trying to warn them all about a threat hiding in plain sight. The clock was ticking, and a storm was brewing, not in the kennel, but within the walls of the precinct itself. And Clara was standing right in the middle of it. The last day of the extension arrived with a heavy, gray sky that mirrored the mood in the precinct. The paperwork was signed. The vet was scheduled to arrive at 4 p.m. Clara felt a cold knot of despair tightening in her stomach. She had failed. Despite the incredible progress, despite the undeniable bond, Chaos was still seen as a liability. His targeted aggression towards Officer Davies was noted in his file as further proof of his unpredictability. She spent her entire lunch break with him, her chair pressed right against the kennel. She spoke to him in a low, soothing voice, telling him how sorry she was. For the first time, she reached her fingers through the bars and stroked his head. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing, a soft sigh escaping his lips. It was a moment of perfect, heartbreaking peace. He trusted her completely, and she was about to let the world betray him. I won't let them hurt you, she whispered, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. I promise. It was a promise she had no idea how to keep. As the afternoon wore on, a strange restlessness settled over the station. A major bust was going down, a follow-up to the same narcotics ring that Officer Richards and Chaos had been investigating months ago. The precinct was buzzing with a tense, coiled energy. Mark was on the tactical team, and Clara's anxiety was twofold, for her husband's safety and for the dog she'd come to love. Around 3:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before the vet was due to arrive, Clara felt a sudden, sharp pain in her lower back. She dismissed it as Braxton Hicks, the false labor pains she'd been experiencing for weeks. But then another one came, stronger this time, wrapping around her belly like a steel band. She gasped, grabbing the edge of her desk. This felt different. This felt real. Her supervisor, a kind older woman named Martha, took one look at her pale face and said, "That's it. I'm calling your husband." But Mark's phone went straight to voicemail. He was in the middle of the raid, unreachable. "Okay, honey, don't you worry. I'll get someone to drive you to the hospital." Panic began to set in. The baby was coming, Mark was in danger, and Chaos was about to be killed. It was too much. As Martha helped her stand, another contraction hit, so intense it buckled her knees. I need to say goodbye," Clara gasped, her thoughts jumbled. It was irrational, but the need to see Chaos one last time was overwhelming. Leaning heavily on Martha, she made her slow, painful way towards the K-9 wing. As they approached, they saw Officer Davies standing near the entrance, talking on his phone in a hushed, agitated voice. He saw them coming and quickly ended the call, pocketing his phone. "Clara, are you okay?" he asked, his usual charming smile looking strained, almost painted on. "You look pale." "She's in labor," Martha said. "I'm trying to find someone to drive her to the hospital." "Oh, no problem. I can take her," Davies offered instantly, his smile widening. "The raid's got everyone tied up, but I'm just finishing my shift. My car is right out front. It'll be faster than waiting for an ambulance." It seemed like a godsend. Martha thanked him profusely, but as Davies stepped forward to help her, a sound erupted from the K-9 wing that made the entire building seem to vibrate. It was chaos, but this wasn't a bark or a growl. It was a roar of pure, unadulterated fury, a sound of absolute war. He was throwing himself against the kennel door with such force that the metal was starting to bend. My God, what's gotten into him? Martha exclaimed, startled. Clara knew. Her blood ran cold. Chaos wasn't just barking at Davies' presence in the hallway. He was reacting to Davies moving towards her. No, Clara said, her voice weak but firm, as she instinctively took a step back from Davies. Thank you, but I'll wait. Davies' smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flicker of something cold and hard passed through his eyes. Don't be silly, Clara. You're in labor. You need to get to a hospital. Let's go. He reached for her arm again, his grip surprisingly strong. And that's when all hell broke loose. With a deafening shriek of tearing metal, the kennel door burst open. Chaos, a blur of black fur and righteous fury, had done the impossible. He had broken out. He wasn't a dog anymore. He was a weapon, a missile, launched with a single, clear objective. He ignored Martha, who screamed and scrambled back. He ignored everything except the man whose hand was on Clara. He crossed the distance in a heartbeat, a silent, deadly projectile. He didn't bark, he didn't snarl. The time for warnings was over. Davies yelled, a sound of shock and pain, as Chaos slammed into him, not biting, but using his body's full weight to knock him away from Clara. Davies stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet and crashing to the floor. Chaos landed on his chest, a 90-pound weight of solid muscle, his teeth bared, a single drop of saliva falling onto Davies' cheek. The growl that came from him now was the sound of a death sentence. He had Davies pinned, his jaws just an inch from the man's throat. Officers came running from every direction, guns drawn. Code red. K9 is loose. Miller was the first to arrive, his face ashen. Chaos. Down. Stand down. But Chaos didn't move. He held Davies pinned, his eyes, burning with lethal intensity, fixed on the terrified officer. And in that moment, as Davies lay on the floor, his jacket was pulled open, revealing a second, hidden phone clipped to his belt. A burner phone. The same one Clara had seen him using moments before. It was ringing, the screen lighting up with a single word, warehouse. It was like a lightning strike of realization. The truth, ugly and horrifying, was suddenly laid bare. Davies wasn't a good cop. He was the mole. He was the one who had tipped off the narcotics ring, the one who had led Officer Richards and Chaos into an ambush months ago. He was the reason Richards was crippled, the reason another officer was dead, the reason Chaos was broken. And now, he was trying to silence the only witness who couldn't speak, but who had recognized his scent of betrayal from the very beginning. Getting Clara alone, away from the station. It wasn't an act of kindness. It was an opportunity. Mark, having just returned from the successful raid, rounded the corner to see the unbelievable tableau. His wife, pale and in labor, being shielded by a snarling dog who had the precinct's golden boy pinned to the floor. He saw the burner phone, heard the frantic shouts of the other officers, and understood everything in an instant. Chaos hadn't been aggressive. He had been a witness. He had been trying to identify a traitor, a killer, hiding in their midst. His rage, his pacing, his constant warnings, it was all for this. He was a guardian, not a monster. As another contraction ripped through her, Clara sank to her knees. The baby, she gasped. Hearing her cry of pain, Chaos did something that stunned everyone. He took his eyes off Davies for a split second, looking back at Clara, a soft whine of concern in his throat. That moment of distraction was all Davies needed. He shoved the dog off him and scrambled to his feet, pulling his service weapon. He's a menace. He has to be put down, Davies yelled, his face a mask of panic and hate as he aimed a gun at Chaos. But he never got the chance to fire. Officer Miller, finally seeing the whole, terrible truth, tackled Davies from the side, sending the gun skittering across the floor. You're the menace, Miller growled, cuffing him with a satisfying click. The danger was over. The traitor was caught. But Chaos's mission wasn't finished. He ignored the commotion of Davies' arrest. He walked calmly over to Clara, who was now on the floor, breathing through the intense pains. He nudged her hand with his wet nose, then laid his big head gently on her lap, right next to her swollen belly. He looked up at her, his amber eyes no longer burning with rage, but filled with a soft, steady light. He had protected his family. His job was done. Paramedics arrived and carefully loaded Clara onto a stretcher. Chaos refused to leave her side, walking alongside the gurney, a silent, furry sentinel. When they tried to lead him away at the ambulance door, he let out a low, mournful howl. "Let him come," Clara said, her voice strained but firm. "Please, I need him." And so, the most aggressive dog in the precinct, the condemned monster, rode quietly in the ambulance, his head resting by the hand of the woman who had seen the hero inside him all along. Clara gave birth to a healthy baby girl an hour later. Mark was by her side, holding her hand, his eyes filled with a love and awe that now extended to the magnificent dog sitting patiently in the hospital waiting room with Officer Miller. The fallout at the precinct was immediate. Officer Davies, faced with the evidence from his burner phone and Chaos's undeniable identification, confessed everything. He had been feeding information to the cartel for years. The ambush had been set up to eliminate Officer Richards, who was getting too close. Davies had been the unseen shooter who had injured Richards and killed the other officer. Chaos had lunged for him then, too, but had been pulled away in the chaos of the firefight. He had never forgotten the scent of the man who had betrayed his partner. His trauma wasn't just from the violence. It was from the agony of knowing the enemy was one of their own and being unable to make anyone understand. Chaos was no longer Chaos. The precinct officially reinstated his real name, Valor. He was cleared of all aggression charges and declared a hero, not just for the warehouse bust, but for exposing the corruption that had cost them so much. But Valor had no interest in being a police dog anymore. His place was no longer on the front lines. His war was over. When Clara and her newborn daughter, Hope, came home from the hospital, Valor was there to greet them. He had been officially adopted by Clara and Mark, a decision unanimously and emotionally approved by the entire department. He walked into their house as if he had always belonged there. He sniffed the baby gently, his tail giving a slow, steady wag. He then settled on the rug beside the bassinet, taking up his new, self-appointed post. He was no longer a canine officer. He was a guardian, a protector, a furry big brother. The story of the pregnant lady and the aggressive police dog became a legend at the precinct. It was a story about the power of intuition, both human and animal. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes, the most broken souls are the ones with the most important truths to tell, if only someone is brave enough to listen. Clara would often sit on the floor, her daughter cooing in her arms, and stroke Valor's head. The dog who no one could tame would rest his head in her lap, his amber eyes soft with devotion. He had been trapped in a storm of grief and betrayal, and she, with her quiet patience and unwavering belief, had been his lighthouse. She hadn't tamed him. She had understood him. And in doing so, she hadn't just saved his life. He had saved hers, her babies, and the integrity of the entire police force. It reminds us, doesn't it? That compassion is a language that everyone, even the most wounded among us, can understand. It teaches us to look past the rage, past the fear, and to see the hero waiting to be found. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. If Valor and Clara's story touched your heart, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the amazing bonds we share with animals. Until next time, remember to listen with your heart. You never know what truth you might hear.